Chapter 3. Marie. Marie gazed at the looming manor before her. The hard snow crunched under her boots, and she shifted her weight while clutching a tattered knapsack and doll close to her chest. Two constables spoke with the owner of the manor, a tall man with dark skin and an eye patch. Marie had seen him before in her parents' clock shop, but only from her hiding place under the counter where she used to play with her doll while her parents worked. She'd heard her parents say his name many times, Drosselmeyer. That had been before the fire. Now the shop and her home were gone, and so were her parents. She'd spent the past week feeling very frightened, crying a lot at first, but now she was empty of tears. Scotland Yard's search for next of kin had come up woefully empty. Alas, Marie knew she had no other family. It had always been just her and her parents, working every day in the clock shop and retiring at night to the small one-room flat above. But for some reason, every time an officer suggested carting her off to the orphanage, whispers of the name Drosselmeyer popped up. And now here she was, along with two constables standing in the snow on the doorstep of the Drosselmeyer estate, mere days before Christmas. What did it all mean? It's terrible what happened, Drosselmeyer said to the constables, but I don't understand. Her parents left her to me? As her guardian? Well, not exactly, one of the constables replied. He was short and round, with a red, runny nose that he kept sniffing loudly in the cold. Your name were all over their ledgers, though Drosselmeyer this and Drosselmeyer that, one of the only things that survived the fire, except for the girl. It was one of the only clues we had to go on, the other constable, a tall man with a mustache as dark as his black constable's cap, added. He suddenly looked to Marie, and she buried her face in her doll's hair. Tell him what you told us, the tall constable instructed. Marie stared at him. Her breath made little clouds of steam above her doll's head. It's all right, the constable said in a bit more gently. Tell him what your parents told you about the ledgers. Marie swallowed. They said they were important. She spoke very quietly. When the shop caught fire, we all ran out. Father gave them to me. He said to keep the ledgers safe for Mr. Drosselmeyer. Then they went back in to try and stop the fire. When she didn't add was that the roof collapsed before the firefighters arrived, and her parents never made it out from the blaze. She has no immediate family, the tall constable explained. Her parents appear to have been private people, and nearly everything they owned was destroyed in the fire. But the child mentioned you knew them, and considering your, status, we thought it worth checking. If I would take her as my charge, Drosselmeyer clarified. Yes, the constable coughed. We would have contacted you sooner, but your valet informed us you were away on expedition until Christmas. It's terrible, Drosselmeyer murmured again in his gravely voice. Such a tragedy. I've been a customer of theirs for many years. The old man flipped through the ledger pages. He'd say it was patrons like me who had appreciation for the beauty of old mechanics that kept his shop running in an ever-changing world. So, you were close? The tall constable prodded. Yes, in a manner of speaking, Drosselmeyer replied. Her parents were more knowledgeable than most, and their clock shop was the only one in all of London that sold the tools I need for my inventions. Inventions, eh? The ruddy constable chuckled. What are you cooking up in there castle of yours? Some Frankenstein's monster? Drosselmeyer gave him a wry look before continuing. I was very fond of Marie's parents. Her father and I even worked together on several projects. But a child, I've never considered. She truly has no one? Marie had been listening with interest to the conversation. Drosselmeyer turned to gaze at her with his unpatched eye, and she huddled her face down against her knapsack, clutching her doll even more tightly. "What will happen to her?" he asked, "if no family is found?" "Ain't if at this point," the ruddy-cheeked constable sniffed. "We've looked all we can. It's off to the orphanage now." "You don't need to speak so loudly," Drosselmeyer admonished. "She does have ears." "It makes a little difference," the tall constable said, a touch more quietly. "Reginald is right. You were our last lead. Scotland Yard can't house her any longer. We'll drive her to the orphanage before dark." He looked to Marie and sighed. "Shame, though. I hate these sorts of rounds this time of year. Sad. Very sad." He beckoned Marie. "Come, child. Back to the carriage." Marie's shoulders slumped. She wasn't sure what the orphanage would be like, but she could tell from the looks on the men's faces that it probably wasn't good. She crouched back over the thick snow, her boots sliding on the icy mountains. As she passed Drosselmeyer, she slipped, landing hard on the ice. The cold stung bitterly against her stockings. "Careful, child." Drosselmeyer helped her to her feet. "Bones are much harder to repair than gears." That was when he noticed the gleam of a pocket watch dangling from her knapsack. Engraved on the back was an ornate letter D. He took hold of it, carefully opening the cover to reveal a tiny, motionless clock inside. "I remember when I gave this to your father," he said, as thanks for his help repairing a particularly stubborn grandfather clock. Drosselmeyer gazed pointedly into Marie's eyes. She stared back, without even meaning to. For some reason, she felt comfort as she did so. He was, after all, the last person left who had truly known her parents. Perhaps he was thinking the same thing. The old man wound the pocket watch and gave it back to her. Then he took her tiny hand in his large, steady palm. "Come along," Reginald huffed. "Into the carriage." "There's no need for that," Drosselmeyer said. His hand never left Marie's. But we've told you," the tall constable insisted. "Scotland Yard can't house her any longer." "Well then," Drosselmeyer smiled kindly at Marie, "I suppose this will need to be your new home." Several days later, it was Christmas morning. Young Marie sat at the breakfast table wearing a simple yet pretty Christmas dress, eagerly eating a bowl of porridge. It was creamy and piping hot, the way her mother used to make it. "Slow down there, or you'll get a tummy ache," the cook hissed. "Didn't your parents ever feed you?" "Yes," Marie replied quietly, "but they died." The cook's expression changed suddenly. "Sorry, child," she said. "Didn't mean to bring that up, especially on Christmas morning here." She placed a basket of warm gingerbread biscuits on the table in front of Marie. Marie's face lit up. "I wasn't going to put these out until later," the cook said. "But what's the harm in an extra nibble or two? Just don't go eating the whole basket, or you'll turn into a right little sugar plum." "That's my doll's name." Marie held up her porcelain doll. She'd been clutching it with one hand in her lap beneath the table. In fact, Marie hadn't let go of her doll since arriving at the estate. The lovely toy had been a Christmas gift from her parents, and had surely cost more than they could afford to spend on a plaything. It was one of her most treasured possessions. "It's a very pretty name," the cook smiled. "Once you have finished eating, you can make your way to the library. Master Drosselmeyer is waiting for you." 2 bowls of porridge and several ginger biscuits later, Marie walked with the butler up a staircase to the grand library at Drosselmeyer's estate. Even with the butler by her side, she couldn't help feeling very small and very alone up against the vast size of everything surrounding them. She had never seen such an elaborate home before, had never even imagined such a place could exist outside of a storybook. The wide stairs were covered with richly patterned runners, and massive chandeliers glowed above them, with at least 100 tiny gas lights each. Even the exotic wallpaper lining the halls seemed imposing. Up until now, Marie had spent most of her time at the estate, huddled in her room, reading and rereading several fairy tales the servants had found for her in the library. All the staff had treated her very kindly, helping her find clothes small enough to fit her slight frame, and preparing a soft, lovely bed. But as grateful as Marie was to not be in an orphanage, None of this felt real to her. The room, the estates, the servants, and even Drosselmeyer himself. It all felt oddly like an illusion that Marie feared might vanish at any moment. Even while safely tucked in her bed, warmed by hot water bottles so she wouldn't need to have a fire going in her room's hearth, she couldn't help feeling lost. The only things that seemed real to her were her doll and the stories she would read over and over again, the same way her mother used to read to her. At least they were familiar. Everything else about this new life was so foreign. What place could a child like her, a simple watchmaker's daughter with no one and nothing left in the world, possibly have in all of this? She hadn't seen much of Drosselmeyer since he told the constable she could stay. She knew from the servants that he traveled often on worldwide expeditions, but now that he was home for the holidays, they told her he spent most of his time in a place called the workshop. Marie had heard her parents say he was an inventor. She wondered what sort of things he invented. Then, almost as if in magical answer to her unspoken question, an invention had mysteriously appeared outside her door earlier that morning. Christmas morning. She nearly missed hearing the faint knock. It was tentative, quite as a whisper. Curious, she had crept to the door and cracked it open a tiny bit to peek outside. The hallway had been empty, but resting on the floor was a shiny metal egg. Its casing was edged with intricate swirls and patterns, and the middle was sealed with a six-pointed star-shaped lock. It appeared to be a tinkered contraption of some kind, and attached by a red velvet ribbon was a tag, its message written in swirling calligraphy: "To Marie, Merry Christmas." She marveled at it, wondering what it could mean. Then the cook's familiar clunky footsteps had approached. The woman had come to see if Marie was feeling brave enough to venture down for breakfast in the dining room, the same way she had come to check every morning. And for the first time, curiosity overcame fear. Marie ventured out from her room. Now Marie stepped through the large double doors to the library, holding the egg gently in her hands and her doll wedged in her arms. Drosselmeyer was there, seated in a tufted chair. A large bird, an owl, perched on the seat's back. The butler bowed and left the room. "Ah, young Marie." Drosselmeyer closed the book he was reading. "Let me be the first to wish you a Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sir," Marie said shyly. "But the cook already wished me Merry Christmas." "Yeah? What's wrong? You okay? Come here." Okay.
What are you doing with your phone?
I'm doing a read aloud.
Not this.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing with your phone?
I'm doing a read aloud.
I seen you with your phone.
Yeah. Can you say hi?
Wait.
Can you say hi?
It's me too. I'm right here.
Yeah. The second, then, he corrected. "And the butler," Marie added. Drosselmeyer chuckled. "Well, then, hopefully, it shall be merry indeed. I see you found your present." Marie held out the egg. "I did," she said. "Thank you, sir. But what is it?" All will be explained," Drosselmeyer said, a twinkle in his eye. "But first things first. Come, let me look at you. My goodness, I almost didn't recognize you. Mrs. Rosamond certainly has found you a fancy Christmas dress. Is this truly the same watchmaker's daughter I used to spot hiding underneath the shop counter?" "I am, sir," Marie replied. "The servants have been treating you well, then?" "Well, then?" Drosselmeyer asked. "Yes, sir," Marie answered. She clutched her doll, sugar plump to her chest. "Thank you, sir." "Come now," Drosselmeyer chuckled. "Do I look so old as to be called sir so often?" Marie shifted her weight and didn't reply. Drosselmeyer laughed again. "Never mind. You needn't answer that. But seeing as you're living here now, there must be a more familiar name we can settle on. Wouldn't you agree?" "Yes, sir. Marie started. I could call you Mr. Drosselmeyer? Drosselmeyer shook his head. No, that won't do. Let's see. I worked with your father as a business associate, so I suppose one could say we were brothers of the same trade. Perhaps uncle is more fitting a title? How does that sound? Marie smiled at the thought of Drosselmeyer being connected to her father like family. There we go. I like that, Uncle Drosselmeyer. Fantastic.
I could do this too.
Fantastic, Drosselmeyer clasped his hands. So then, young Marie, are you settling in nicely? I am, Uncle, Marie corrected herself. Your house is very large. Is it? Drosselmeyer gazed about the library. I spent so much time cooped up in here. I suppose I haven't wandered the halls myself in some time. I've been staying in my room too, Marie added. I don't want to get lost. Drosselmeyer tilted his head, a touch sadly. You will never get lost, child, he assured her. Mrs. Rosamond mentioned she hadn't been able to pull you away from your storybooks, and I am sorry I have not been more available to you since you arrived. My work is rather time-consuming, and I'm afraid that I am new to this. I've never been a father, you see. Traveled too much to have time for our family. I'm sure this must feel very different for you, too. Yes, Marie said quietly. It does. Sympathy filled Drosselmeyer's eyes. You must feel very sad. Tears prickled Marie's eyes. Since her parents had died, no one had really spoken of her feelings. There had been many hushed whispers around her, all ending with the words, poor child. Everyone spoke about her, but not to her, not until now. I miss them so much, she said softly. Drosselmeyer allowed Marie to bury her face in his shoulder, staining his suit with tears. I know this is hard, he patted her head, but you will get through this. I promise you that. Do you really think so? Marie sniffled. I do. Drosselmeyer nodded. Come, there's something I need to show you. He held out his hand, and Marie followed him through another set of double doors and into his workshop. Upon entering, Marie gasped. The room was cavernous, filled with from floor to ceiling with whirring gears and gizmos. Look, Sugar Plum, she whispered to her doll. It's as though we've stepped inside a machine. Drosselmeyer guided her over to the corner of the room where an ornate golden grandfather clock stood. Marie gazed at the beautiful timepiece. Even as the daughter of a watchmaker, she had never seen anything quite like this. The top face of the clock looked almost like a globe, with large numbers printed against crackled glass. The bottom compartment was hollow, with gilded-edged windows giving full view of the interior mechanism. Wheels and gears nestled together. Heavy thunks marked the passing time. Yes, sweetie. All right.
Can you pick it up?
I will. But where a pendulum ought to be, there instead was an exquisite figurine of a woman with an enormous skirt made entirely from gold. The skirt was sculpted with a split at the base, revealing even smaller figurines poking out. They rotated around a tiny track, each one clicking a step farther as the seconds ticked by. To Marie, they looked like tiny round-bellied dolls. Do you know what this is? Drosselmeyer asked her. It's a clock, Marie responded. Drosselmeyer nodded. Yes, but not just any clock. The most intricate, tricky, confounding contraption I have ever encountered. This is the clock your father helped me mend. My father? Marie asked. Yes, said Drosselmeyer. When no one else in all of London could get it working properly, he had the golden touch. I have no idea of its origin. It was here at the estate when I arrived, but no matter how I tried, I couldn't get the gears working. Your father, he was determined. He worked for weeks on this clock until it was up and running just so. Drosselmeyer knelt down in front of Marie, placing his hands upon her shoulders. I see your father in you, he said. Both of your parents. Only a determined little girl could have made it this far. Will you stay strong for them? And for me? Marie sniffled and nodded. Good girl. Drosselmeyer gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. Now, no more crying. It is Christmas morning. If there is one thing that is imperative on Christmas morning, it is joy. And presents. Drosselmeyer reached over to his workbench and picked up a shiny key. He handed it to Marie and nodded to the key egg's lock. I'm afraid inventions are the only gifts I know how to make, he said, but I hope you like it. Merry Christmas. Marie carefully used the key to unlock the egg and gently opened it. Oh, she said. Inside was a tiny mechanism with miniature gears surrounding a bumpy cylinder. The gears began rotating, and the cylinder slowly spun. One by one, thin metal pins plucked along the cylinder's precisely arranged bumps, producing a tinkling melody. It's a music box, Marie realized with delight. She couldn't help feeling a rush of excitement as the pretty song played. You made this? For me? I did, Drosselmeyer said. Your father once told me that each winding gear or pumping piston has a story to tell about the person who made it. I'd like you to keep this music box, Marie, to remind you of your parents. They loved you very much, and when you listen to it, remember that their love is inside you too. Without thinking, Marie threw her arms around Drosselmeyer and hugged him. Thank you, she said. Drosselmeyer patted her head. It is not much, but you are quite welcome. Marie turned the music box in her hands in awe. It was beautiful, perfect, even more intricate than any of the watches or clocks she'd seen her parents work on. Could I make something like this too? She asked hopefully. Could you teach me? Now that is something I do know how to do, Drosselmeyer replied. Would you like to learn how to tinker? Marie nodded. I would like that very much. And so you shall, Drosselmeyer said. Marie beamed. She gazed around at all the whirling wheels and gizmos clicking about the room. To her, it almost seemed like magic. Magic that she was going to learn how to do.